Hey guys, and welcome to Rise. I am so delighted to have Dr. Ray Doctor with us. He is a PSYD, works as a rapid breakthrough life coach. For the past 27 years, he successfully helped over 6K clients break through limiting beliefs and challenges to have better relationships, improve family life, and more success. Dr. Ray received his doctoral degree in clinical psychology, earned a master's degree in counseling psychology, and an undergraduate degree in human behavior. Welcome, Dr. Ray.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I know that you have been dedicated over 20 years in helping people transform trauma and deal with PSTD. And I know that you developed a very quick method to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you want me to share about that?
Yes, please.
All right. So first off, when I say a quick method, I would not necessarily say like it's like that.
Mhm.
However, most people have some level of trauma and they're not aware of it. And for the most part, with a lot of tensions on our planet right now, particularly in 2020, a lot of that is coming to the surface. People are not understanding why it is that they can't function, to why they maybe are agitated, why they're snippy with their children, to maybe old memories are coming up and so forth. And so most of us have unintegrated stories and experiences in us. And so when we feel we are pressured, when we're stressed and so forth, or there's a situation that's putting us literally in survival mode, such as, can I pay the bills? Am I going to be safe? Do I have shelter? Am I going to be able to communicate with my neighbors, my community? Because there's been a lot of divided opinions about, say, the coronavirus or whatever else. So people are feeling very stressed right now in their body, and whatever had happened to them, say in their childhood or something else, could be coming to the surface. So I wanted to share that right now. So when I talk about trauma, I talk about the perspective of where it is something that's not integrated. And so when you look at, say, PTSD from the perspective of something not integrated, it is an experience in which continues to loop and loop and loop. Basically, we play it out. And more than often, it's unconscious. So we could be having a conversation with our spouse, with our children, coworker, and all of a sudden our nervous system becomes overstimulated and we react. We might get violent. We don't know where that's coming from because something is not integrated. When a person calls me and they're sharing their challenges, whether they have trauma or not, in that moment, typically they have a version of themselves where they're talking to me, Dr. Ray, this is me, this is what I want to work on. And I have moments I become a different person, or I have moments that things trigger me. I've experiences in which, for whatever reason, I become this monster. In that moment, that person's consciousness has the ability to be aware of how they prefer to be because they're talking to Dr. Ray and trying to set an appointment, to the version in which they don't want to be. That means that in every moment, that while there's a version of yourself that you don't want to be, there's also a version of yourself that exists that you prefer to be. Otherwise, you cannot be talking about the trauma from that higher perspective. There's a part of you that has aware of it. So it's kind of more, if it'd be more accurately said, is that how can I crystallize being more this better version of myself that's thriving versus this other part of me that goes into survival? And so a big part of my work is connecting to that person's experience, reality in which they prefer to be, and hardwiring that. And in a process of hardwiring that version, then say this PTSD, this trauma behavior starts to dissipate. Sometimes it disappears very quickly. Versus the old model, whether it's a coach or a therapist, typically it's a therapist, they put a lot of energy on the trauma, what happened, the trauma. And while that client, that patient is talking about it, they're actually reinforcing the trauma. In fact, it is contraindicated for like psychoanalysts to work with someone who say has PTSD, because the talking about it 2-3 times a week has a tendency to bring it up, and there's no solution. There's no connecting to the greater version of themselves that they would want to be. So it's just kicking all that up. And many people who are probably watching this, if you've seen a coach or therapist and you felt worse, and they're telling you, well, this is the process, it doesn't make sense. Well, now you know, because your brain doesn't discern time, space, or reality. So when you're talking about it, you're possibly bringing it up, and you're even hardwiring the victimization. So a way that I work with clients is by being able to move into how they prefer to be. It's not sweeping what had happened under the rug. It's just a different approach when you understand how consciousness overrides biology. Consciousness overrides any drama or negative experience you once have experienced.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned that you want to hardwire the better version of who we want to become. Can you talk more about what does it mean to hardwire?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so people are watching this. I'll just do a little process, okay? Why not? Okay. So, of course, don't do this if you're driving, but close your eyes for a moment and just go on a little journey with me. And as you hear my voice, notice the other part of yourself noticing my voice. Because obviously you have to have the awareness of my voice in the awareness of yourself observing my voice. In this now moment, just watching this interview, there's two of you. There's more, but let's just talk about the two. Now let's talk about the part of you that is observing my voice and being able to connect to that version of yourself. Bringing your heart space into that, bringing your joy and love to that space, to that part of yourself that prefers to feel good no matter what, that prefers to feel good over being right, that prefers to feel good regardless of the narrative that you can continue to perpetuate that doesn't make you feel good. Now be in a space of just, in this moment, I want to choose to feel good. If you were to practice this, rather than go into your head or the story, and you were to continue to move into the space of wanting to feel good, your biology, your body is automatically going to basically connect other cells and create a neural net of this experience, of this preference. Your brain will literally connect to other cells, other neurons, to where this becomes more of your preference. This is what it means to hardwire. And it would be no differently if you were to say work out at the gym and you do a certain pattern and you repeat this pattern, that in time your body would grow, it would stretch into the new way your body is to be created. So this is what it means to hardwire, literally. So take a moment, take 3 deep breaths in, and on the third one, slowly open your eyes.
Yeah, thank you for this demonstration. So you create space, right? You create space, you involve all the senses, the hearing, the, you know, visualizing, and you meet that version of yourself that is whole and perfect and ready to rise.
Mhm. Some people might say, well, this just sounds like your active imagination. You're absolutely right. And a great way to validate you, but to also understand this in a way to where you realize it just is your imagination. I remember a friend of mine who had painted a picture, a beautiful picture of her partner, and he lived in Italy. And when she sent it, she didn't hear back from him. And typically they have a time that they connect. They connect at least, 2, 3 times, a couple text messages throughout the day. He didn't respond. She went into a space of maybe it was too much too soon. Till she started touching up the picture. She started freaking out. 24 hours went by and she literally was in almost like a panic attack. Like, what happened? All suddenly, she received an email with an MP3 recording of a song that he had written for her in the studio. He was so moved, he went in the studio to record a song for her to proclaim his love for her. She inadvertently destroyed the picture, created all this drama, and even in that moment when she received the song, she was so much in like this panic. She was almost angry at him that he didn't let her know where he was at. And then it took her to like calm down from wherever she was, that space of not feeling worthy or enough or whatever else she played out, to going, oh my God, my partner wrote me a song.
Right. How many
So
times, right, we take and create such a story in our mind that is far removed from reality, and we just, right, get into the
yeah.
muck of it. And
Yeah, the narratives. And sometimes we think the narrative is true. Consensus reality would be where, like, say you have a friend who speaks you a certain way, and other people say, yeah, she kind of speaks in a very patronizing way or condescending way, and you get validation from other people say, yeah, she's kind of hard to deal with. Now, that's a narrative. But the reality is that when you talk about her that way, that friend, your imagination is still creating the experience where you feel victimized or disrespected. When to rise above that is to realize that this narrative still doesn't help either, because I feel like this. How can I be more unconditional? How can I recognize that that's her own pain body speaking to me, and that she loves me? She's unconditional. This is all she knows right now. So it's up to me to create a narrative of more expansion, compassion, and to accept this friend who just communicates this way with a lot of people, and to not take it personally. We do that. We could get really fixated on a belief, and it only hurts ourselves.
Right. So you talking about our nervous system responsible for tuning our frequency to survival or thriving. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So if I were not getting sleep, if I were not eating well, and I wonder if I will be able to pay rent, several things are going to possibly happen in my experience with that. And so, first off, when I watch the news, if I choose to, I might believe that story because I'm already in survival mode. I'm freaked out. All of us human beings, we're walking, talking antennas, meaning that we're vibrations, we're frequencies, and we'll tune in to that which usually comes from fear, to where things that typically don't bother us, such as we don't receive a text message right away, and we're like fine with it. We wonder, we go back, did you get the message? Is everything okay? We go into fight or flight with many different experiences. So as an example, why this is very important, which I brought up earlier, was that in this moment, we're being bombarded by information from the news, and everyone's saying each other's a liar. So we have to know our own truths. We have to have our connection to spirit, God, whatever that higher awareness means to you. And so we're being bombarded by different stories, and literally we will pick up on that. We might wake up feeling sadness or something and not know why it's there. And it's because we are all interconnected. We are channeling this fear on this planet. We're channeling also the joy on this planet. We are channeling death and also birth. All of us are having different realities. But if you're more stressed, typically what you'll channel is the fear on the planet. If you are more open and more relaxed and able to work through your stuff, you'll channel the expansion, the sustainability, because while it looks like shit to many people, to other people, we're seeing dolphins swim in the ocean, to new children being born, to the ability to make money in a new way. There are things that are collapsing, but there's also things that are being co-created. So it's very important. And if you do have PTSD or something that's not been spoken about, trauma, then same thing. When you're feeling you're being bombarded by this information, it could trigger that. It could trigger that. And it could come out. And so that's not a bad thing. My approach, my narrative, it would be that's a gift because it's there anyway. I would rather this come out, by rather than me taking it out of my child. I'd rather notice that something's making me feel uncomfortable rather than having negative thoughts about my partner. It's recognizing that maybe I'm processing and experiencing life from a filter in which doesn't serve me. But also, why would my body, my nervous system be tuned in with this? And you go back to, haven't been sleeping very much. I've been having these toxic conversations with my brother. I mean, the list can go on. And so it's very important to provide self-care for yourself. And so you can tune to your highest frequency.
Right. And also be very, selective with the kind of information that you allow in, right? Because if you set yourself up to watch the news, then be prepared to get, tons of negativity and fear injected into you. And this is just how it works. So, I haven't been watching the news for maybe 30 years, and I remember some conversations that I had with my dad about it. And he said to me, how can you be so ignorant? And I said to him, I don't think it's ignorance. I think it's a wise choice. When the news will be positive and will inspire me and will add something to my growth, to my expansion, to my compassion, to my love, I'll be the first one to watch, right?
Absolutely. I'm the same way. I've not watched the news. Once the thing is that when I watch it, I can see that there's an agenda. It'd be different if it were a journalist who's saying, I heard this, I saw this. This is just the experience I had, without it being like, those people, this is what they were doing. There's definitely an agenda with what's being shared out there. And that I don't feel comfortable with. But I'm aware of it. I'll give you an example. So like even like Facebook, my brother talked about how like they take information, they track you, and it's so like you can continue to be bombarded by that information. So you as a consumer will buy that. Well, the fact is I have awareness of that. If like, for example, I'm thinking about I could play guitar, but I want to step up a little bit. I clicked on this thing here. And when I clicked on this guitar mastery thing, other things started showing up. I started clicking on all of them. And I was thinking, thank you, Facebook, for sending me stuff that I'm interested in. Because the thing is that I don't see it as the enemy, but I see it as that it's creating information for me to pick and choose. I am in control of my awareness and my consciousness, so that I don't see it as being victimized. Nothing can control me. So even the news, same thing. I hear the way they're sharing that perspective. I can hear that narrative. I can see it with both liberal and conservative channels. But I'm just like watching it, like children fighting.
Yeah, exactly. I would say wounded children in adult shells, right? Yeah, playing games of power, greed, and ego, really.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is our collective, and this is why it is so important for us to claim back our power and take responsibility for you know, for our own personal journey, because as a collective, we were brought up in this kind of culture. And it's only when we really choose to step away and unpack what we actually been downloaded with, right? What is our software, so to say, that we received growing up as children, especially in the early years. And it's really about starting to shed off and let go of all those non-serving beliefs that we picked up, and really stay with the essence of who we are, which is divinity and right, the power that the universe has, right? We are made from the same substances, and we have that same infinite intelligence moving through us, right?
Absolutely. It's, as an example of collective beliefs and ideas, and since I've shared so much here, I would like to kind of give a description of, say, that mechanism. So I was watching the Bad News Bears from the 70s with my son, and the hotshot kid Kelly in there, there's a moment where he's trying to pick up on a woman, and he's saying, you know, he's trying to pick up on, he's like, you know, I play for the Bears. He's like, I ride a Harley. Does that turn you on? And it's obvious that he's trying to show his accomplishments and say who he's trying to be attractive to this person. And it's outward obvious, okay? However, that, like, for, I'm assuming people who would watch this would kind of see it as insecurity. They would see it as like, this person doesn't feel enough. And yet there's another collective beliefs of people who still do that. Here's my PhD, here's my trophies, here, all these things to give me a sense of value. So you say they trust you or respect you. That's fallen apart. That's kind of like a collective idea of sense of self or worth. And so we're expanding beyond that. Like that in a movie now, meaning like currently, it probably wouldn't be comical. It wouldn't make sense to the new collective norm, because it's outwardly like saying that, hey, you'll like me because I own a Harley, or you'll like me because I play baseball or something. Versus now we realize we're more asking the question, but who are you? Who are you beyond this? Who are you when you're in your shit? What are your strengths and weaknesses? How do you show up to the world and the planet? What is your purpose? What is your idea of a happy community? You know, people want to know more of that. You know, talking about perfectionism, I'm talking right now, and I had a crown replaced, and they gave me a bunch of shots, you know, to numb me. And my tongue is like, so as I'm talking on this interview, I'm kind of like feeling my tongue like, but I don't, honestly, this is an example. 20, 30, 40 years ago, I wasn't, you know, doing this then. I was a little kid, but other men would be like saying, let's reschedule because I'm not perfect. I'm not good enough. I got to be perfect. I got to be talking this way, and blah, blah, blah. I can't be talking this tongue that's doing it. So the new creation is inclusive. That's part of it. Like one of your children might run into the room right now in this interview. I would hope he would not edit it out, because that is life. You know what I mean? That is life. There's so many moving parts.
Exactly. And it's really about showing up in the imperfection, and actually you becoming more relatable, right? Because you know, the thing is that people want to show their good sides, their kind of polished dimensions. And the reality that we all human beings, we all have all of that, all the traits, really all of it. And when we authentically own in that, and when we show up in our vulnerability, in our realness, in our raw and you know, human way, we create more connection, right?
It's sexy. It's the sexiest thing, at least for me. That's my idea when I connect with people, where I'm like, yes. it's a true vibrance, it's a true energy. It's so raw. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think we are moving there, although on the way there we are forced to wear masks, which is quite ironic, actually, right?
Symbolic, yes.
Symbolic.
Yes.
Yeah, because really the process of transformation and growth is unmasking and taking off all those masks that we had to put on to feel loved, to feel accepted, to feel belong. Because there were so many factors that kind of interfere with our process of growing into who we are here to be. And you know, we wanted to fit in, so we had to cut some edges and mold some things to fit into certain boxes. And it's really now stretching out and claiming our true, authentic, real power, which is, as you said,
Absolutely.
all of it.
All of it. You know, this is connecting, at least my imagination is connecting us to the idea of trauma. Now, so so imagine if you grew up in a world where it was about black or white perspectives, being perfect, to not behave in a certain way, to even, like, say if you had sexual abuse, an alcoholic parent, or something had happened to you that you're embarrassed about, to something you don't understand, but then you are being pushed to make money or to kind of claim that false sense of self, while this other part of yourself is disjointed. A big part of trauma is this idea that we try to push away something that had happened because of shame or something else. But in time, it comes out in our skin as like eczema, to a tumor or whatever else, or to our behaviors. And that part of the healing, say our trauma on our planet, is this experience to be able to bring in the dark and transform it into light. Because it's, what's interesting is that even like people who have had arguments, when they speak their truth and they break through that conflict, more and often there's this like natural feeling of like feeling lighter, like that's off my shoulders. It's, I let go of that. Or after a really good cry, releasing that. You mentioned something about the unmasking. I imagine there's going to be some people will connect that to their beliefs about the coronavirus versus hearing that symbolically. And there's no way to stop that. And I want to share something about that. This is a prime example where there are people who come from communist countries to where they're experiencing this because it's collective generational trauma in their body as another genocide or something else. That's what people who, like, say, come from, you might call it a privileged country, or a country where you just say you have like physical freedom, you might not understand this. But there's a lot of other people who were not able to express themselves. So that's kind of where we're coming from also, where it's like that we have to think not just about ourselves and our family, but the entire collective, because we're moving through this. Symbolically, I can't say it with my tongue. This means, it's kind of funny, a lot more to other people. And it's triggering that potential trauma. How many people were not heard, seen, or valued? Come on, raise your hand. How many people felt that way? Okay. So what do you think this might mean to those people? Or actually people who, when they spoke up, they were beaten or even murdered. So just be aware of this. This is a time where there's a lot of this coming out. And when I say coming out, it can look negative, or it can look like this is what's supposed to happen, because we all have been pushing this down and not talking about it.
Absolutely. Look, in my personal story, you know, first of all, I'm a third generation Holocaust survivor. So in my lineage, there is, oh my goodness. But when you mentioned that communist mentality, I mean, I remember walking when I was say 9, 10 years old with my grandmother in in a town in Israel, not in Russia. And I was speaking to her and she used to say, shh, they can hear us. She was really afraid that somebody will overhear her saying something that is not allowed. And, the next thing, she'll be persecuted. And so it's real. It's absolutely real.
I lost many relatives in the Holocaust as well. So I get that. I completely understand that. And it's not the idea of saying that that's exactly what's happening. It's talking about collective beliefs, emotions, things that look and feel similar to what had happened. To even like say, I have experienced vicarious PTSD from my parents. Both my parents have passed away in the last 3 years. And my mom grew up where, she was hiding from the Americans and the Japanese in Okinawa. And so when I was growing up, I couldn't understand why my mom was always stocking up with food. She was hiding in the caves when she was a 9-year-old girl. And so like our house was kind of like a Costco. And I'm like, man, this is the place to go if we go to war. Exactly. I joked about it when I was a child, realizing, oh, she was preparing. So was she hoarding or was she trying to protect her family? So there's these experiences. Now, if I not healed myself, there's a possible chance I also would stock up with food. And my son would pick up on that and it would be passed on. So sometimes we see it outright, meaning that like the next generation, like me, I've got like all this food packed up, is still still traumatized and living it out. So you might not see it. It might be my emotions. Don't say anything. Be careful. Don't be singled out.
Right. And you mentioned something about how we perceive trauma in the Western world, right? As more like a memory. And you have a little of a different outlook on that. Can you share?
Okay, so this kind of ties into the beginning of this share, and that is, so keep in mind that neuroscientists, they can't actually say that this part of your brain is responsible for memory. They cannot say this. They cannot say this is exactly what's happened with 100% proof. They might say the hippocampus, when damaged, seems to affect a person's memory, but they can't say that that's where all the memory is and so forth. So now this leads to your question. So when they try to repair the brain, they do neurofeedback. Well, who the heck, what is the mechanism watching the screen if you got brain damage? Who's this higher awareness? It's consciousness. So if consciousness is helping you, like say, heal your brain and your feedback, then consciousness must be the overriding vehicle in this experience. Now, look at that for a moment. Classical science would say like memory is, say, in the brain. It would say that you have muscle memory or a memory how to ride a bike. But if every cell in your body has been replaced within the last 2 years, in that you literally have a new brain, and maybe you haven't ridden your bike in 25 years, what is riding that? Because like, for example, as you're watching this, you're not the same person you were in high school. You can't even like connect any dots to why it is that you maybe stayed with that girlfriend or boyfriend, because you're not the same person. You, me, all this, we're forever unfolding consciousness. Even after watching this interview, you're going to think differently. You're going to feel differently. You're going to become literally a different person. You're going to perceive life differently because you literally are a different person. We are shifting constantly our awareness. Now, if you say who you are is this physical body and this brain, like if you're totally into the dance conversation, then you might say that's who you are. But as you know, this physical body is just my hand. You're not talking to my hand. You might see my face. You might have known me for 20, 30 years, But when you talk to me, you're not talking to that kid who was 25 years old or my consciousness back then. You're talking to how I perceive and express myself now. So I am always growing. And so when we talk about memory, we are talking about in this now moment with my new consciousness, me connecting and experience a reality of something in which is moving through me now, meaning that in this now moment, I'm perceiving something that potentially happened in 1978. And it's a moment I'm drawing a parallel connection to something that maybe happened or occurred or whatever. But remember, when I'm drawing that connection to that experience, that person, it's happening now. And my brain is going to experience it as now. And if I start talking about a trauma that happened back then in this new consciousness, it might trigger me right now where all of a sudden I feel trauma and I'll say, it's my PTSD. No, it's how I'm perceiving experience now, and it's not integrated, and therefore I'm triggering my body now. So you see where I'm coming from? So it is, your consciousness isn't stuck in time. So if you filter something that's now a moment from a positive perspective, more matter of fact, yeah, as an example, I used to share this story about 20, 30 years ago about my father when he hit me in the mouth in front of a teacher. I'd stolen something and he just kind of went up, he backhanded me and my mouth bled a little bit. And when I used to share that story 30 years ago, I had resentment towards my father. And just imagine me sharing this with you. Just imagine you're my therapist and you go, and I start getting agitated and you say, you know, you might have PTSD from that, Ray, because the way your body's responding, like it's as if it's happening now, because it is happening now. It's not because what had happened to me, it's that what had happened to me hasn't been healed within my own consciousness now. It hasn't been integrated to my new becoming now. So now if I talk about that, I can barely remember it. I kind of can see, I remember it happening with, say, my teacher was Miss Rush, whatever, but I have no charge because I also knew my dad was doing, that generation used to kind of just hit you to, my dad loved me, like, and he just wanted me to grow up with integrity and not steal. Like, he was doing his best. And I'm not saying that from the perspective because I'm trying to forgive him, therefore push it down. I actually don't believe in contrite forgiveness. I believe in connecting to the most awareness that you can have to love yourself and then see the experience to see whether or not you want to give this person energy or not. I believe that it's up to you to see the experience from whatever perspective and perception you want that's most healing for you. So for my father, that truly is in my heart of like, my dad really loved me. I love who I am now. Like, I grew up with a lot of the Marine Corps principles. I always show up, I follow through. That was part of my dad's teaching. Now, would I do differently? Do I hit my son? No. But the point is that I can get over it. He's not supposed to be perfect. That's another narrative I have. We're supposed to fuck up as parents. We're supposed to fuck up as human beings. And once we realize that, we're also able to find that in our heart to say, understand others, maybe compassionately let them go, if you don't want to use the word forgiveness. And when we get to that space, we're able to take ourselves much lighter. I just realized I completely digressed from the original question.
Yeah, but that was a great journey you took us on, because you know, I also don't believe in forgiveness that comes from the mind. You know, when you say to yourself, okay, I forgive, you can say that, but is it integrated? Is it embodied? Probably not. It's really something that needs to be born organically, because you cultivated that self-forgiveness and self-compassion first. And then when you forgave yourself for your humanness, for all your so-called mistakes, or, you know, should have done that or shouldn't have done that, and all those ideas that we carry about ourselves. And when we really connect to the entire spectrum of our being, as we mentioned before, with the shadows and the weakness and all that, then we can rest in that bridge between our humanity and divinity. And when we really find that sweet spot inside of us, and we realize that we are both, we can start see other people also as that combination, right?
Yes, it's yes, the journey is within. It is within. It's typically not a whole lot changes out there, but a lot changes here, and you perceive that differently. And when you perceive that differently, you respond to that in them differently, and therefore they have to show up differently, and or they have to adjust or whatever else, or they're no longer your friends, or they become better friends. This is the process. We have this idea by changing actions outside of ourselves to moving, you know, physical parts will better our lives, but it starts within. It starts within.
It starts within and it ends within, right? This is the entire
yes.
journey. We are, each and every one of us is the center of the universe. The universe is around us, right? We are in the center. And you know, and all that infinity without also goes within. We are infinite beings and universe on its own within ourselves.
You know, I saw my father on his deathbed this year, and it was my, so you probably noticed in this interview that I smile a lot, even when I talk about challenges. Now that's, I picked it up from my father. My father has carried over 1,000 dead bodies. He was in World War II, the Korean War, 3 tours in Vietnam. I mean, this guy saw a lot of bloodshed, and he had been shot. And so, and you know, dad died when he was 2. His mom died when he was 15. I mean, he'd been through a lot of stuff, but his humor, his love, his heart helped him move through this. And one thing I learned from him to not take life so seriously, and that, you know, everybody eventually is going to die, you know, just all there is changes. And December, when he had his 95th birthday party on Zoom, you know, after that, about a week later, he just went, Jesus Christ, how much more of this shit? You know, he said, like, he was like ready to die, but not from the perspective of pain, not the perspective that he was like resentful, just more like, God, I'm tired of having my ass wiped, and like, you know, and we can see he was done. He lived 2 years longer than my mother. Like, after my mom passed away, typically people from that generation died right afterwards because they have no purpose or whatever else, or their sense of self as being in that marriage. I'm not judging it at all. He had purpose beyond that. There was so much more about my father. And so come January of this year, like, we could see he started to decline. Like, he started like checking out. He started having that ghostly look. And my 2 other brothers, we all spoke. We said, he's ready to go. And so we had him like in a more comfort care type of hospice care. And when I'd come visit him, he would look at me, we would hold hands, and like, sorry, I'm getting emotional. The greatest piece you would want to have for your parent or your loved one is just that look, just like, it's okay. And he would, I remember just smiling. And sure, he had his moments where he'd go into like what they would call dementia, but it's more like he's ready to go. Like, he's a little angry. He can't get up. He can't do stuff, you know? So like, let him be. We didn't like drug him up. We gave him some CBD. Like, he was chill. He was cool. And he died in a very natural, beautiful way, smiling. But moments where he was checked out, looked, had that kind of like, not zombie look, but just like he was there. But he had lived life, and he died with a smile. He died with his heart open. And he actually died 3 days apart from my mother's death 2 years prior. They were born 3 days apart also.
Wow, that's a mystery of life, eh?
Yeah.
Working in magnificent threads, and sometimes we able to pick it up, and then we in awe of this synchronicity and this absolute order in what seems to be chaos.
Yeah, and my father lived through so much what we call trauma. The way he processed it was everything. His life philosophies, such as, shit happens, helped him move through a lot of things. So, and he lived out his life with a lot of joy still.
That's very beautiful. And let's end on this joy note. We are coming to a wrap here. And I know that you have a beautiful gift to share with the audience. Do you want to talk about it?
Yes, it's called Rapid Relationship Breakthrough. And I made this program. It's free. It's about 90 minutes of videos to a short guidebook to go through asking yourself questions, simple questions that activate your consciousness, like I've shared completely like through this entire interview, to move into the space of more awareness, to look at some of the programs that have been maybe embedded in your psyche that keep you stuck. Even though it says relationship breakthrough, it's not so much about like, the typical romantic relationship. It is a rapid breakthrough to your true self. And that's
the most important relationship, right? The relationship with yourself.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for this gracious gift, and thank you so much for coming and sharing your time with us. And if people want to find you, work with you, follow you, what's the best way?
The best way to reach me is just go to my website, which is www.raydoctor.com. I'm sure you have a link here.
Yes.
It's spelled RAYDOKTOR.com. And that's my real last name. And you can laugh about it because still to this day, clients will say, what's your real last name? Or people will laugh when I'm out and about, and they'll say, if you're a doctor, you be doctor. And I'm like, I've heard it for a really long time.
I'm sure. Yeah. Well, you manifested that prophecy, right? So you became Doctor.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate your wisdom and your energy and your vibe. And thank you for being here, and thank you for being in service and doing the beautiful work that you do in the world.
Likewise, and I really love all that you're doing. I love your depth, and it's why I wanted to be on this call. I get asked often to be on these, and I'm being way more selective these days. I'm not into the cheesy, romantic, outdated paradigm conversations. There's much more work to do here.
Right, and the time
and I'm
is
not
now.
judging that.
Yeah,
I'm not judging that, but it's just more like, okay. It's, to me, it's just like bad reality TV. So
right,
let's get real. I want to be real. Let's get real.
Let's get real. Let's show up in all our imperfections. And even for me, it's such a stretch. English is not my first language, as you can hear, and it was actually my worst subject at school, believe it or not. I could not grasp English whatsoever. Always had tutors and, being sent to, anyway, ended up writing a book, so I've done quite well. But I do have my accent and my tongue twisters and, my wrong words that I'm saying. And I'm just like, this is who am I, you get me as I am. And
I love it. There's gonna be people who might be offended the fact that I drop a few F-bombs. So it's just, you can't please everyone.
You can't please everyone, and it's okay. I'd rather people that love me for who I am, and see my heart and see my soul, and that's all that matters. And if some don't like me, that's also okay. I'm super okay with that. So thank you so much, and until the next time we meet.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.